have returned, and I understand that the missing phone was not missing at all? No. Good. All right, we're back on the record. Our jurors are present, all parties and counsel are present, and Mr. Prislovic,
Thank you. All right, I'm going to just pick up briefly where I left off. We were talking about the police search of the scene when they initially respond to these calls. And I point out these calls because you heard from Sergeant Zizzo, who did his best to describe for you their response to what was, not necessarily a clear situation. They received multiple calls, and they talked to multiple people on the scene that pointed them in 3 different directions. Did this happen at Selma and Argyle? Did this happen at Selma and El Centro? Did this happen at Vista Del Mar and Selma? Was it in the street? Was it in the parking lot? What exactly happened? They show up, they do their best. That was the testimony from him, that with this conflicting information, they did the best that they could, but they went to these multiple locations, sometimes receiving conflicting information. What Mr. Tacopina did when he stood up on cross-examination was play videos from another officer to show, look, there's 7, 8 officers on the scene. They're doing this thorough search of the street. He tells you in opening statement, it's a thorough search, spotlights involved. But what he's not told you is why the police then don't find the fired cartridge cases from the defendant's gun, this prop gun, that's going to fire prop ammunition, why they don't find those cartridge cases either, because they're saying that's also a semi-automatic firearm. So 2 cartridge cases also would have come out of that. Mr. Tacopina also made a similar error to you when he stood up in opening statement, and he described how you were going to see Mr. Efron returning to the scene. He put up part of that grainy surveillance video of a person with a white top coming back to the scene at 11:10 and made a big point of telling you that's going to prove that Mr. Efron's a liar because Mr. Efron said he came back with his girlfriend, and these were his words, unless she's a ghost, she's not on that video. But you know now, because you've sat through the evidence and the testimony, that all the evidence points to that not being Mr. Efron. Mr. Efron, when he came back, took photographs of the cartridge cases. When LAPD went to collect this video, in the day after they were notified of this, they were told by Mr. Efron an approximation of when he turned. He didn't have an exact time. He gave them an approximation. They went, they collected the video, they saw someone returning, and they thought, okay, that must be him, and they collected it. That error that they made back in November of 2021 has certainly been flushed out in the years since this has happened. And what you know from the timestamp on Mr. Efron's photographs of those cartridge cases is that he actually came back closer to 11:45. The video stops at 11:20, so obviously we don't have video of him actually coming back. It certainly does not contradict Mr. Efron's detailed statement to you that when he came back, he had his girlfriend with him. She wouldn't obviously be on video. It's not collected and not played. It's also clear the person who comes back is wearing different clothing than what Mr. Efron was wearing at the time. And you also heard Mr. Efron testify at the preliminary hearing. When he was first shown that video, he looked at it and said, that's not me. So all that together, you know that the person that you see on that video was not Mr. Efron. Mr. Tacopina, I'm sure, made a big point pointing out why Mr. Efron returning to that scene, not having his girlfriend with him, and proving that Mr. Efron was lying with those details, was all to get you to believe his next big point, which is that Mr. Efron planted those 2 fired cartridge cases that he found at the scene. That's what the defense needs you to believe in this case. But the idea that Mr. Efron planted those cartridge cases, when you really think through all the information that you have, does not make sense. One reason, consider that Mr. Efron, as he's telling people what happened to him over and over and over, I mean, I could go 9 times over, he's telling everyone that the defendant shot at him 3 or 4 times, including the night he brings those 2 cartridges into the police station. He tells that police officer 3 or 4 shots. This is important because if you assume that what the defense is trying to argue to you, that Mr. Efron planted those cartridge cases, you have to ask yourself, how, within reason, how would that happen? What you'll find is that none of the things that you would reasonably expect to happen actually happened in this case. If he planted those cartridge cases, what would you expect? First, where did those cartridge cases come from? How did he actually, mechanically, how did he have 2 fired cartridge cases to plant? The defense wants you to believe that apparently he knew in advance that Mr. Mayers, the defendant, was going to shoot at him. And that he was going to shoot at him with a semi-automatic pistol. So Mr. Efron, the mastermind that you saw testify here, hatched this elaborate plan, and weeks before this crime, he went to a gun range, and he got a 9mm Glock 43 and fired it multiple times. By some miracle of a coincidence, Mr. Efron must have known that ASAP Lou accidentally bought a magazine for a Glock 43. Okay? And that ASAP Lou, somehow Mr. Efron learned that. He's also going to intuit or know ASAP Lou's going to load that magazine, fully loaded, and he's going to leave it at the defendant's bedroom closet. Now, if you're already thinking this sounds completely unreasonable, I'm with you. It makes absolutely no sense. At this point, just to go back to jury selection and the example that you were given with Boomer the dog, and Mr. Lewin asked you, well, how can you be sure that a tornado didn't come down the chimney and just trash the house? How can you be sure? I mean, honestly, that sounds more reasonable than the idea that Mr. Efron knew in advance that he was going to be fired at and knew to go get that specific kind of gun to fire it at a firing range to collect those cartridge cases that he could plant in the future when this shooting happens. There's no way that this scenario would work without Mr. Efron knowing in advance that this shooting is going to happen and that he's going to need cartridge cases to plant at the scene. Under the defense scenario, too, he would not have time to get those cartridge cases any other way. He has a limited amount of time at 10 p.m., just after 10 p.m. on a Saturday, to leave the scene where the shooting happens, go find a gun, fire it off 2 times. The gun he's going to find also is going to be a Glock 43, so not any gun, but that specific gun. And he's going to fire it off multiple times, and then he's going to go back to the scene. I guess, by 11:10, when that person in the white shirt, so he changed his clothes, he's going to go back and he's going to plant those cartridge cases at the scene. He would not have enough time to possibly do that. So second point to consider, how it doesn't make any sense that Mr. Efron planted these, is that, as I pointed out, Mr. Efron told literally everyone who would listen, including Wally on those tapes, that the defendant fired more than 2 shots at him. Now you all, I'm sure, can appreciate how stressful this situation would have been for Mr. Efron, and that as the defendant's firing at him, he's not sitting there counting exactly how many shots. So as he's telling the police how many shots were fired at him, he's doing his best to recall a stressful situation, and he genuinely believes 3 or 4 shots are fired at him. That's his sincere belief. That's what he tells the police. If he is going to plant those cartridge cases, though, and come up with the crazy scenario that I told you, he intuits the shooting's going to happen, he gets these cartridge cases in advance so he can come back and plant them at the scene, wouldn't you reasonably expect Mr. Efron to tell the police the defendant only fired at him 2 times? Wouldn't that be your reasonable explanation? If he's making this up, he planted these cartridges, and he's making up how many shots were fired at him, wouldn't you expect him to walk into the police and say, no, it was only 2 shots? He would match his story with the physical evidence that he's walking into the station with. Now, to this point, here's another way that Mr. Efron would have had to have used his telepathic powers, because he's going to know, or he would have to know, that after he tells the police, I only got 2, but there were 3 to 4 shots that were fired, he's going to know the police are going to later go collect a video that has audio, and that audio is going to definitively show you that in fact there were only 2 shots that were fired. I want you to consider, when you're considering how reasonable this scenario is that Mr. Efron planted these cartridge cases, consider the alternative, which is, what if Mr. Efron had walked into the police station and he said, the defendant fired 4 shots at me, and he walked in and he was holding a bag with 4 fired cartridge cases in it. And then the police went out and collected video, and you found out there were only 2 shots. Then you'd have a major, major problem. It could not be true what Mr. Efron would be saying. But that's not the evidence you have. You have the inverse. You have him saying, I genuinely believed it was 3 to 4, but I only found 2. And then you have independent evidence, independent of him, that shows you it was actually only 2. Third problem with Mr. Efron planting these cartridge cases. If what the defense was telling you was true, that Mr. Mayers fired a fake semi-automatic gun, and Mr. Efron planted these 2 real fired cartridge cases at the scene, wouldn't you expect other evidence to contradict his story? I mean, Mr. Efron specifically sends text messages that night to the defendant's manager, Ills, and 12E, all of which, in sum and substance, accuse the defendant of firing a real gun at him. Wouldn't you expect even one of those people to respond back to him and say, what are you talking about? We all know Rocky carries a fake gun. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. That's their moment to contradict him, to confront him, and they don't. While we're on the subject of his text messages, and him really kind of locking himself into this being a real gun that's fired at him, those text messages are important because they also betray 2 other major flaws in the defense theory of this case. Those messages by Mr. Efron put the defendant, certainly the defendant himself, but all the other people in his inner circle on notice that Mr. Efron is going to accuse the defendant of shooting a real gun at him. So I've already told you, wouldn't you expect them to respond back with, hey, you know that that's not true, this was a fake gun. That's not what happens with, the text messages you saw from the defendant were to deny anything happened. But second, the defendant would immediately understand that that prop gun that he used, right, that real prop gun that he has, that is not only his get out of jail free card, that is his make Mr. Efron's fake lawsuit go away later. So he needs to keep close tabs on that fake gun, right? So your reasonable expectation was, Mr. Efron texts the defendant, you tried to kill me with your real gun. The defendant's response would be, I gotta keep that gun. Now, what is the actual response you receive through Lou? ASAP Lou comes in here and tells you that the defendant came up to him with the prop gun and said, get rid of this, I don't want it anymore. Is that reasonable? This is kind of where my job gets hard, because I have to explain to you how their version of how this prop gun disappeared doesn't make sense. But we know that none of this actually ever happened, because this is all a made-up story. So when I talk about the prop gun, understand that there never was a prop gun, okay? Never to begin with. I'm sure what happened was Lou took that Glock 43, the real one that was used, with the modified slide, and got rid of it. And when he did that, he forgot that there was an extra magazine for that gun in the defendant's closet. Now to that point, and oh my gosh, this is a new magazine, I'm not saying that that magazine that we have in evidence, that magazine specifically was the one in the gun that was used at the time the shooting happened. Guns come with multiple magazines. You can purchase additional magazines for guns. But the defendant knew he had to get rid of that real gun. He can't have that, because that's going to definitively tie him back to this crime scene. So either he or Lou, his right-hand man, get rid of it. And they get rid of it with the magazine that's in it. But they forget there's that backup magazine in the defendant's closet. But either way, let's assume their prop gun theory is true. Why would the defendant get rid of the one thing, the most important thing that could definitively prove his innocence? Why would he do that? You received an instruction about someone, either the defendant or someone other than the defendant, trying to conceal or destroy evidence, and using that as actual evidence that the defendant was aware that he was guilty. Why would the defendant get rid of that gun unless he knew it was going to prove he was guilty? Unless he knew it was a real gun. It literally makes no sense that he would not keep the prop gun so that when Mr. Efron goes to the police, he can turn around and say, here it is, here's the prop gun. This is the one I used. Anyway, if you're inclined to accept Lou's story that he flew across the country on a private jet and he gave the prop gun back to the co-director of the DMV music video shoot, there's still yet another problem with Lou's story. Why doesn't Lou get the gun back? So they haven't explained why would the defendant get rid of this gun in the first place. He needs to keep this. This is very important in this situation. But for whatever reason, he gets rid of it. Lou flies it back and they give it to this co-director. Lou knows. Lou knows this is a crucial piece of evidence. This would prove that his brother is innocent. So what does Lou tell you? What efforts did Lou make to get that gun back? Because he needs it back now. Oh my God, I can't believe we got rid of it in the first place, but now we definitely need it back. But what does he do? He makes one phone call, and he's basically told, I don't really know where it is. And so he decides, just let it go. make any other inquiries, doesn't do anything else to try to get that gun back. Does that sound believable for even 1 minute? It's certainly not reasonable. We're bordering on insulting to your intelligence. Also consider the timing of when Lou comes up with this idea that he gave the prop gun back to the co-director of the music video. That was literally something he came up with the day that he testified. Why does that matter? Well, we don't have an opportunity to go find this co-director, bring that person into court, call them as a witness. But Lou's known about him for years. They could have called him. They could have had him come in and testify and tell you all about it. Certainly, they would have known about it when Lou tells his story in August of 2024. So where is he? Where is this co-director? Where is his testimony? You didn't hear from him because his whole story is made up. On top of that, has the defense proved to you that this prop gun ever existed? Ever existed? I mean, you would want to hear from the co-director that has it now, right? But wouldn't you also want even a single piece of paper that proves to you that that gun ever existed? A receipt for it? This was on a music video. Where are the call sheets about it? Is there a safety coordinator that could say, yeah, I was there, we had prop guns, and I had to warn people about them? Was there a video of the gun, even at the music video shoot? Is there literally a picture or anything? We found a picture of Ilse's face from the day after this incident. This they're saying is a prop gun that not only was it in the music video, but it was so widely known that the defendant carried it. Where are pictures of him with it other times? There's literally been no documentation provided to you that that gun ever exists. No purchases, no receipts, no paperwork anywhere. Lou says he took that prop gun, right? And what did he do? He modified it. He put a belt clip on it. He modified the magazine. Did he bring in any proof of that? Receipt for a belt clip? Receipt for a magazine extender? Nothing. On top of that, this is an item that the defendant carried around all the time, right? He had to. This was his security. When the police search his house, do they find literally anything that supports the idea that a prop gun was there? Do they find any other prop guns? No. Do they find prop ammunition? No. Nothing. Literally nothing. You literally have zero proof except for the testimony of Lou and the testimony of 12E. And I've talked to you about why you should view their testimony with a healthy dose of skepticism. That's literally the only thing. There's no independent proof that that prop gun has ever existed. And equally insulting is this idea that there is like a cone of silence within the ASAP collective relating to members who knew that the defendant always carried this prop gun, which they only speak about, only ASAP 12 and only ASAP Blue, they only speak about this on the eve of trial. And that they're going to hold this information inside them, knowing that the defendant, their brother, is facing criminal charges. They're going to hold this inside, and they're only going to really present it to the 12 jurors. Does that make any sense to you? As soon as the defendant's arrested, what would you expect them to do? You'd expect them to be beating down the doors of the police station to tell the police officers and detectives, you guys got it all wrong. This is a fake gun. That's not what they do though. They hold it inside. They let him have criminal charges hang over his head. They let the preliminary hearing come and go. They literally wait till the day before jury selection to finally reveal that there was the gun that was used was a prop gun. It's, again, defies all reason. They claim, 12 and Lou, they both claim that the police never tried to talk to them. It's not true. You heard that they both refused to talk to the police when asked, that the judge specifically asked both of them, will you sit and talk to the police? They both refused. But even more, that's not really the expectation you would have, right? They had this information that would exonerate their friend, their brother, their meal ticket, the guy they rely on. You'd want them to seek out the police. At least that's what you'd expect. Not wait for the police to come knocking on their door, knowing that they have this secret information. Ladies and gentlemen, when you decide that the gun in this case was a real gun, for any one of the many reasons that I've given you, this case is over. Let me address really quickly, though, the new defense. It goes something like this. If you don't believe this was a prop gun, try to believe that when the defendant fired his real gun, he was only doing it either in defense of Ills or in defense of 12 people. Now, right off the bat, you have to acknowledge that that defense is completely contradictory, completely incompatible with the other defense, which is, no, actually, this was a prop. It cannot be both a prop gun and a real gun. The problem with that defense is very similar to everything else I've talked to, which is this whole case is on video. What the video in this case shows you is that Mr. Efron was not the violent person in either of these incidences. And especially at the corner of Vista Del Mar and Selma, when you can see that initial interaction, you can see that he's feet away from Hills as the defendant charges towards him with a gun. The defendant was not protecting anyone. He was not doing anything but initiating an attack, which he legally cannot do and then claim self-defense. I want to finish my argument with you by telling you a story. The story I'm going to tell you is the story of the defense in this case. If what they're telling you or want you to believe is true, this is essentially what would have to happen. Now, Rocky, he's a famous rapper. He's in his house and he's just hanging out with his good friend Lou. Lou would do anything for him. They meet in a crowd. Lou becomes his personal assistant, his tour manager. He's a DJ. He has his own clothing brand. He's a security consultant. Lou does it all. You need to know that even if you need someone to be at your house while the police are searching it, Lou's got your back. You need someone to come to court, lie on your behalf, provide a false alibi, Lou will do that for you too. Lou is Rocky's right-hand man. Now, Rocky's having security problems. He's constantly being victimized by scary people. He's in a nightclub. He's stabbed with a real knife. It was violent, scary. Not only was he stabbed, but his good friend Twelvey was also stabbed at the same time. That's the kind of violence that he's facing. Not only that, scary people break into his house. He's had his home burglarized. He's had stalkers follow him. On top of all that, which has happened to him directly, that violence that Rocky's experiencing doesn't happen in a vacuum. Other rappers around him are also the victims of violent crimes, some even being shot and murdered with real guns. So faced with this violent world, these violent people, Rocky does the only reasonable thing he can think of. Does he hire extra security? No. He turns to Lou. And Lou, his security consultant, and a professional security person who will remain unidentified, jointly came to another reasonable conclusion, which is that when someone needs to defend themselves against real guns, real knives, like Rocky does, what they should do is they should carry a fake gun. Lucky for Rocky, he just so happens to film a music video, and on that music video set, they just so happen to have such a prop gun. Does he have to go out and buy a prop gun? No. That would have created a paper trail that could have proved that he had this prop gun. Instead, what Rocky does, he uses his ability to see in the future, where he sees that he's going to need this prop gun. And so he takes one of the prop guns from the music video shoot just in case. This is going to be very handy when his good friend Lou suggests to him that he should carry the prop gun to defend himself against, again, these scary people with real weapons, real knives, real guns. Lou, you got to understand too, in this story, Lou also loves guns. He owns a bunch of guns. He loves to shoot them. And he's very knowledgeable about guns. Specifically, though, Lou owns a Glock 42, which uses .380 ammunition. Very important. You got to understand this for the story. Neither Lou nor Rocky own a Glock 43. That has to be true in order for their story to make sense. Because a Glock 43 uses 9mm ammunition. But back to Lou, the other thing that you need to know about Lou is he's also apparently very clumsy. He's not detail-oriented. And when Lou goes to the gun store one day, he just so happens to purchase an extra magazine, and it, wouldn't you know it, golly. Even though he owns the Glock 42, he just so happens to grab the wrong magazine. And he accidentally buys a Glock 43 magazine. Now remember, totally wrong magazine, will not fit in any of his guns, totally different caliber, totally useless to it. And around the same time, Lou and Rocky decide they're going to go to a shooting range together. And Lou comes over to Rocky's house, and he brings his guns and his new single useless magazine he's just bought for the completely wrong gun. And only then does Lou realize his mistake. While he's in Rocky's house, of course. Even worse, Lou calls around trying to find a gun range that they can go to, but he can't find one. So they don't go shooting. Now he has his guns, that's why he has his guns at Rocky's house, but that's why they don't go shooting. So what do they do instead? They're going to hang out, they're going to drink alcohol, and they're going to talk. Lou's not only clumsy though, Lou is also fidgety. That's his word, fidgety. And instead of fidgeting with literally anything else in the house, maybe the label on a beer, literally anything else, what Lou's going to fidget with is that magazine that he bought for the wrong gun. And Lou's fidgeting is basically going to consist of him loading that magazine, that completely useless magazine, with his real ammunition. The ammunition, by the way, is difficult to purchase, regulated, but Lou doesn't care. Lou fidgets and also apparently stops fidgeting when the magazine's fully loaded. Doesn't unload his 9mm ammunition. For some reason, keeps it in this useless magazine. And Lou, because he's responsible, is going to leave it at Rocky's house. By the way, the first time Lou's going to mention that he's fidgeting and that he has to do that is when he's on cross-examination at trial, and the fact that his useless magazine was fully loaded is pointed out to him. Convenient detail. Anyway, because Lou's been drinking, he leaves his guns, he leaves his magazine, including that useless one at Rocky's house overnight. And he comes back the next day and he collects most of his stuff. What Lou doesn't collect, though, of course, that useless, fully loaded magazine. You also have to understand that even though I told you in this story, Rocky, he's been told, carry a fake gun, he doesn't really follow that advice when it comes to his house. And even though he's told he should carry a fake gun, he's going to disregard that advice and he's going to have real guns in his house, including chrome 44 Magnum Desert Eagle handgun. He's going to have a rifle. He's going to have a shotgun. But importantly, none of those guns use 9mm Luger ammunition. And Rocky keeps those real guns right next to his bed. Somehow, and Lou doesn't really explain this, after Lou leaves this Glock 43 magazine at Rocky's house, the magazine miraculously is going to end up not just in Rocky's bedroom, but in his bedroom closet. And it's going to be in a box with a bunch of stuff that actually fits the guns that Rocky has. Rifle ammunition, shotgun ammunition. And again, it's just a total coincidence. Lou's useless magazine is going to end up, the one he's been fidgeting with is going to end up in Rocky's bedroom closet. Now, at this point, this is where I need to introduce yet another character to this story. This character, he's a cartoonesque villain. He's hulking, hugely muscular. He spends most of his time in the gym, except for when he's using his cartoon villain powers of seeing into the future and mind control. What do I mean by that? Well, this figure, I'm going to call him Relly, is going to set up Rocky to make it look like Rocky shot at him with a real gun when everyone, including Relly, knows Rocky only carries fake guns. So how does he do this? Well, he's going to go to a shooting range, Relly. A few weeks before, he's going to set up Rocky. And he's going to fire guns, and of course, because he can see into the future, and he's going to set up Rocky, he's going to shoot a Glock 43 handgun and just collect those cartridges. Now, because Relly is such a mastermind, even though he's planning on setting up Rocky, he's going to film himself while he does this, for whatever reason he wants to have proof, I guess, of his master plan. While he's at the gun range, he's going to use his power to see into the future and see that Lou has bought the wrong magazine for a gun that he doesn't own, and that Lou is going to leave the magazine at Rocky's house, and it's going to end up in Rocky's bedroom closet. And with that knowledge, Relly is going to intentionally fire that Glock 43. Collect those cartridge cases and carry them around just in case he happens to be in a place where Rocky shoots at him with his fake gun later. Relly's going to fly from LA to New York, North Carolina, back, repeatedly taking commercial flights. And somehow he's going to keep a hold on those fired cartridge cases that he's going to use to frame Rocky. Now here's where the mind control comes in. Relly somehow gets Rocky to provoke a confrontation. It's Relly's idea, but Rocky's going to do it. And he's going to make Rocky reach out to him with threatening messages and propose that Relly meet him when it's actually Relly's plan all along, right? It's brilliant. So Relly meets up with Rocky in Hollywood, and Relly gets Rocky to pull the gun on him as he's attacking Rocky. Now I say attacking Rocky, but what I really mean is that Relly's using his non-dominant left hand and casually reaching out towards Rocky. This, of course, is going to make Rocky respond. But what does Rocky do? Well, nothing, actually. This is where I have to introduce our next character, 12 to the story. And 12 is going to have the good fortune to be able to see and explain that Rocky didn't pull the fake gun as Relly had planned. What happened was the fake gun just so happened to fall out of Rocky's pants. What terrible luck for Rocky that it would fall out at that precise moment. And not only that, but fall into his hand, and then his finger would land near the trigger just at the moment where he happens to walk into view of a camera. Even more unfortunate, because in this story, Rocky isn't mad. He's not upset with Relly. You know, remember 12 told you, oh, these were casual messages. Why are you ducking my calls? Let's get to it, you know. Very friendly. Rocky's not mad. But Rocky's going to look mad on this video for some reason. It's going to look like he's advancing towards Relly, when in reality, as 12 will tell you, it's just that he didn't have anywhere to go. I mean, apparently except for the exact same direction that he came in when he walked into the frame that he did. But Relly's not going to be successful in his plan just yet. Even though Rocky has the gun in his hand, Rocky's going to walk away. And since he hasn't satisfied his objective, Relly's going to follow Rocky and the other members, and he's going to call them a bunch of bad names. Relly's seen the future, so he knows that Rocky's going to attack him. But Relly's going to attack Ills first, and Relly's going to throw haymakers and punches at Ills, repeatedly punching him in the face. Now, shockingly, despite Relly's tremendous size and strength, Ills will suffer no injuries. This is where Relly's plan runs into some really good fortune. Because even though Relly knows that the gun is fake, Relly's going to start acting like Rocky's using a real gun. And as is Relly's just fantastic fortune, Rocky and 12B are, also for unknown reasons, also going to act like Rocky is firing a real gun. Rocky's going to chase Relly, which he doesn't have to do because the gun that he's using is fake and doesn't fire anything. 12B too, he knows it's fake, but 12B's also going to run away across the street and hide behind a wall. Really though, he's just playing along because he actually knows the gun's fake. Relly's fortune's getting even better because there will just so happen to be a camera that captures all of this brilliant acting by Relly, Rocky, and 12. Okay? As is Relly's plan. Now, he's been successful. Rocky's fired that gun at him twice. He knows he's got those cartridge cases to plant to frame him. So after everyone leaves, what does Relly do? Of course. Does he plant those fake cartridge cases that he's been carrying around to frame Rocky? And then stay there, point them out to the police. Hey, look, you guys find these. No. He's just going to leave. And he's going to wait for the police to search, not find anything, and then he's going to come back. And he's going to plant them for reasons that are unexplained, because he's then also going to pick them up again, and he's going to walk them into the police station himself. And then when he reports this to the police, he's going to tell the police that Rocky fired 2 gunshots at him so that his story matches the evidence found, right? That's what he's going to do? No. Actually, what he's going to do, this is brilliant, he's going to tell the police that it was 3 or 4 gunshots. And in fact, he's going to repeat that over and over and over and over again. Why? Again, Relly's got that power. He knows, he can see into the future, he knows that there's going to be video that captures the sound of only 2 gunshots. And Relly also knows that when the police search Rocky's house, they're going to find Lou's magazine for that Glock 43, which will miraculously be consistent with the fired cartridge cases that Relly planted, but which it's all miraculous because Relly was, using his future-seeing power. Now, Relly's going to make a mistake. That night, he's going to accuse Rocky of firing a real gun at him. Specifically, he's going to accuse Rocky directly, and he's going to tell Rocky's manager, and he's going to tell other people that were with Rocky, who all know that the gun is fake, via text message that Rocky actually fired a real gun. Now, even though Rocky knows that Relly is going to say that he used a real gun, even though he knows he actually fired a fake gun for some unknown, still unexplained reason, Rocky is going to tell his good friend Lou that he needs to get rid of the fake gun. That fake gun is Rocky's best proof that he didn't shoot at Relly with a real gun. But for some reason, Rocky tells Lou to get rid of it. And Lou does. How does Lou do that? He flies back to New York on a private jet, and he just gives it back to the co-director of the music video where Rocky got it after the shooting. Now the police are going to get involved, and the police are going to arrest Rocky for shooting a real gun at that mind-controlling, super muscular Relly. And all that Lou has to do is go back to the co-director of the music video and ask him for the gun back. But unfortunately for Rocky, that gun's been misplaced. And Lou isn't going to follow up at all. He's going to decide one call's enough, that's it. Even though Lou and 12B love Rocky like they're brothers, for some reason, they're going to decide not to tell the police that Rocky's innocent. They're going to wait until Rocky goes to trial, and then at the very last minute, they're going to tell the jurors that it was a fake gun. Because obviously that's the rational thing to do. Wait for your brother to have charges hanging over his head. Wait for your brother to go to trial and then spring it on the last minute. Ladies and gentlemen, if that story sounded like it was not just unreasonable, but literally impossible, that is the defense story in this case. When I started, I told you that there's one key issue you need to decide. Was it a prop gun or a real gun? The overwhelming evidence in this case was that it was a real gun. Here's why. The defendant provoked that conversation, Mr. Efron, via text message and phone calls. He was clearly upset with Mr. Efron prior to that meeting. When they met, the defendant was clearly angry. He pulls a gun, which Mr. Efron and Ills immediately respond to by backing away. That's consistent with a real gun, inconsistent with everyone believing this is a fake gun. When they reach the corner of Vista Del Mar and Selma, the defendant pulls that gun for a second time. Immediately, he's making aggressive moves with the gun. He's making actions towards Mr. Efron. That's consistent with a real gun, inconsistent with a fake gun. Mr. Efron immediately dives behind Ills, uses him as a human shield, while the defendant's making active, furtive movements, trying to get a line of sight around Ills. That's only consistent with a real gun and inconsistent, completely inconsistent with this gun being fake. The defendant fires off 2 rounds, or loud, they set off car alarms. 12B retreats behind a wall. That's only consistent with a real firearm, completely inconsistent with a fake gun. After the shooting, the defendant gets rid of the gun. That's undisputed. That's completely inconsistent with that gun being fake. The defendant still has that Glock 43 magazine in his bedroom closet. On top of ammunition for the other real guns that he owns. Again, that magazine, consistent with the type of firearm that fired those 2 cartridge cases that are found at the scene. Those real cartridge cases, that real ammunition. That gun, the Glock 43, only fires 9mm. None of the other guns in the defendant's house fire 9mm. He has nothing else in his possession that that magazine would go to. It's completely consistent with him getting rid of the Glock 43 after the shooting because that's the real gun that was used in this case. Clear, definitive proof the defendant fired a real gun that night. The last point I'll leave you with, on the other side, there's literally no evidence of a prop gun. No evidence that it ever existed. The actual prop gun has never been produced. Definitely not to you. There's no prop ammunition found in his house. The rationale, this whole security thing for carrying a prop gun, defies common sense, defies logic, totally unreasonable. The rationale for pulling that prop gun on a man who knows it's a prop gun. Completely unreasonable. There's no prop ammunition found at the scene. There's literally not one piece of paper, not one shred of documentation that could prove to you the existence of this gun. And again, all the actions of the people that you see on that video, completely consistent with a real gun being fired, completely inconsistent with this being a prop gun. So left with that, clear evidence that the defendant used a real gun, and a complete lack of evidence that he used a prop gun. Your job, as I started in my opening statement, as I started here, is simple. Simple. The evidence compels you to your decision, and it compels you to find him guilty. That is the only just verdict in this case. Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a break now, but it's going to be shorter than usual. 1:15, please be outside the courtroom doors at 1:15, at which time we will resume. Again, please don't discuss the case.